Yeah, I've got with me today a good friend of mine, guest Andrew Wilson, and so I'd like to bring him up. Andrew is, of course, the host of the Crucible channel on YouTube, and more recently on Rumble, the host of the Extravaganza, together with our buddy Jake Rattlesnake. And Andrew has really exploded onto the scene the last few years with, I would say, a tempest storm of insane debates. He's debated everybody from Cenk Uygur to Tomi Lahren to Destiny multiple times, you name it. Andrew's been out there debating. I have as well. We've had a lot of, I think, commonalities in terms of maybe who we've debated and shows we've been on. So I want to thank Andrew for coming on with us. And first thing I'd like to talk to Andrew about is maybe on this topic of boomers. And I don't want to, again, I'm not saying that boomers are bad, inherently evil, or anything like that, but I think that there's just a sort of a bubble that they get in that they don't realize that a lot of things have already shifted. We're already seeing in the debate world, for example, things shifting. We didn't used to have debate on TV. The thing I can think of is like maybe in the 80s there was like the these William F. Buckley 70 show. In the 1970s there was Buckley. They would have these sort of debates with him and whoever else that was supposedly on the left. But now we've sort of seen the resurgence of debate. And one thing that I think Andrew is really good at, not just debating, but really being with precision, honing in on topics that people assume without questioning. And that is, in one case, the issue of rights. I know that Andrew's had debates with people like Tim Pool and Dave Smith and others, where it gets into this issue of libertarian rights or rights theory. And Andrew, why is it that you think this is so effective in terms of getting people to question what they mean of when they speak of their positions being based on rights?
So, first of all, thanks for having me, Jay. It's been a long time coming that I came on and did this show with you, so I appreciate that very much. Jay's also completely correct. He's been out there stomping the guts out of progressives and atheists and everybody else for years. I've been watching it with great interest. We do run in some of those same circles. So anyway, thank you for that. Moving into the rights argument. So the reason I like to hone in on this idea that rights are a figment, at least how we perceive them in the term of positive and negative rights in modernity, they're a complete fiction. They're completely made up. They're a product of the mind. What I'm trying to always do is force a person to evaluate this so that they understand that if there are indeed rights, if that is something we can come to, then they're going to have to be divinely grounded, or you're not going to ground them at all. It's not going to be possible to ground any type of right, period, unless it comes from the divine, and that's it. And Tim Pool fell prey to this, like many, many other prominent libertarians like Dave Smith, ended up having to essentially concede. But if that's the case, and it has to be grounded in God, then that must mean that we have to follow his laws too, right, Jay? So if we have rights which are grounded there, then you're making the concession that God is real, right? He must be, because you believe in these inalienable rights which are given to you. So how come we can throw the rest of it out? Why is that allowed?
Yeah, I noticed too, not just with libertarians that maybe are more on the conservative side of things, but when you've debated even the more radical progressives and the feminists, they also tend to appeal to this amorphous idea of rights, and yet nobody really seems to ever explain what a right is, or how it is, or where it is.
Well, I'll explain
why
it.
They just think it is.
Yeah, I'll explain what a right is. A right is a figment of your imagination, which was completely and totally made up, and it's used interchangeably with what is actually true, which is force. Yeah, every idea that you have, secular idea that you have of rights, is actually just an appeal to force. You have a right to a gun. You have as much of a right to a gun as you have force to protect your right to own one. You have as much a right to speech as you have force to protect this right to speech and every other right thereof. And it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, right? Every right is going to be an entailment of force and what I could call force doctrine, an appeal to men to force people to do the thing that whatever the social paradigm requires that they do. And any right that you would appeal to, whether it's a human right, a natural right, whatever it is, if it's not divinely grounded, then you just made that shit up. You just made it up out of thin air. And if you make it up out of thin air, then I can make up all sorts of rights too. Like I have a right to kill you. I have a right to eat your child. I have a right to beat you to death. I can make, as long as I have the force requisite for that, I'm in good shape.
Right. Now, keep in mind, we're on radio too, so be careful with what words It's okay.
Gotcha.
But remember too, on this topic of rights, and I really like the way that you elucidate this idea of force doctrine and how it has to be enforced, because I think people don't even think about the fact that when we live in Western free markets and freedom-based societies, and people think that, well, I'm in the West, and my feminism is something that I get as a right because I'm a woman, and the government gives me these rights. What would you say to a feminist or somebody on the left who argues that the rights that they have come to them because the government has given it to them?
Then they're making my point for me. What they're saying is that they have a right to do whatever the government is willing to use force to allow them to do. And that's it. It's that simple. Feminists have no force to do anything. All they can do is whine. All they can do is whine and complain, right? They have to appeal to men to utilize force to give them whatever rights they want. How can I demonstrate this? Let's look at most of the world. Most of the world, women have no rights. And who can they appeal to for them? Only to men. Only to men. They can never appeal to themselves. There's never been a single instance, not one single, and I've looked through the entire historic standard, all recorded history that I can find. I've never found a single instance of women overthrowing the chains of oppression by force. They've never done it even one time. They always have to appeal to men. And this is what force doctrine is stating, is that really, for feminists and for women, their rights are actually just granted to them by men. That's actually what's going on. Men are granting them their rights, and men can take those rights away. So you better hope that men appeal to the divine for the grounding of these rights, because if they don't, what's to stop us from putting women in cages and having our way with them however we want and doing whatever we want? What's to stop us from doing that? Secularists and humanists have no answer for this.
Yeah, their religion, their worldview, even though it's irreligious, it's a-religious, actually is a kind of religion that the more consistently it's played out actually leads to brutality and leads to tyranny. And this very forced doctrine that you're talking about, people don't even think about how, the supposed rights that you have as a feminist, you're only allowed to have that because society allows you to have that with this forced doctrine to go after somebody if they trample those rights. So laws have to be backed up with this forced doctrine as you're talking about.
Well,
I think that
and
most
they
people
have to be
think,
backed up the other way too. So remember, men uniquely are in a position to throw off any chains of conditionals they don't like collectively with force. Men can do that and have done that. We did it in this nation. We've done it. I mean, all throughout the historic standard, if men find themselves in conditionals they don't like, they literally just kill everybody until they get to the conditionals that they like. That's actually what they do. But women can't do that. They not only can't do that, but they have to rely on men to enforce that on their behalf. So it sounds like men should really be getting the big piece of chicken here. You're right. They should really be getting a little bit of due and respect in society for the fact that we're so benevolent. And by the way, I think if the sex has changed, they wouldn't be nearly as benevolent. If it was the case that women suddenly woke up tomorrow collectively and they were 2 to 3 times stronger than men, I don't think they would be nearly as benevolent towards men as men are towards women.
yeah, no, these ideas are pretty kind of earth shattering when you begin to really think about it, given the paradigm that we're in. And some of these debates that you've had have been pretty feisty, pretty spicy. People should go and check out, for example, the Tomi Lahren exchange that you had, or the Cenk Uygur exchange that you had. Do you see any commonalities with the talking heads and the sort of empty, vacuous, ungrounded worldviews that they argue for in terms of these exchanges and what we're talking about with
Yes,
rights?
they steal from Christians. They steal from Christians across the board. They steal their entire worldview from Christians. They steal all forms of benevolence from Christians. They steal all the good stuff. And then they just want to add all the degeneracy in there. They want to sprinkle in the degeneracy while justifying it through our worldview. That's what's so crazy. They have no grounding foundation for anything. Tomi Lahren, for instance, told me that women have no duties at all to men. No duties at all. Only men have duties the opposite direction. And by the way, Jay, we're born to have those duties according to her, right? So according to her and feminists like her, what men are is they're disposable income wallets. We get to pay for everything for women, but don't worry about it, Jay, because we get to watch them enjoy them spending all of our money, right? That's how we're apparently hardwired according to these people. But yes, they steal the Christian ethical worldview. That's what they do. All their concepts of harm, murder, theft, everything, totally stolen from us. All of it stolen from us. And then what they do is they sprinkle in degeneracy as a new form of harm. If you don't let us be degenerate, that's harming us. Therefore, Christianity bad. It's the most convoluted and corrupted worldview that I've ever seen, and it's grounded on nothing. It's literally built on a house of sand. They can justify nothing, and they never have been able to justify anything.
Yeah, I think the most kind of surprising exchange that I saw you have was with Cenk Uygur, because I thought at least he would bring some kind of leftist talking point, some kind of socialist argumentation, and all he did was like cuss you out and go after you personally. Really, I think showing that that guy's completely vacuous, completely bankrupt, no real, intellectual backing behind what he's saying at all. And that seems to be kind of a pattern of what you and I both see in a lot of our debates, is that these people are kind of like shells. They're really kind of fraudulent. They don't really have much behind them other than rhetoric.
Well, let me ask you a question. This is what I found from doing, I think at this point, several thousand debates with everyone, high profile, low profile, random people on Discord to Twitter, just like you do, right? What I found is this: is that when you're talking about the liberal paradigm, the progressive paradigm, everybody operates within it. But the second you don't grant it, you say this worldview, I'm not playing within this worldview. I'm playing with a different worldview. They're lost. They're done.
Yeah.
You have to actually, the only way that these people know how to communicate is if you already accept their preconceived notions of progressive and liberal worldviews. And if you don't accept those, they're totally lost. Like if you started a debate, for instance, with a progressive and you said, yeah, I'm going to come at this from a totally fascist worldview, right? Or something like this, which even that I would argue is still a liberal worldview in a sense.
Right.
But the thing is like the second you move outside of their paradigm, now suddenly the things you don't think they think are bad or not bad to you, the things they think are good or not good to you, all justification falls out the window. In other words, much like a vampire, you have to agree to invite the worldview in. Right.
Yeah.
Or else
analogy,
it doesn't do anything. It does nothing. Right. It does nothing. It falls flat immediately.
Another one of the characters that have had quite a few interactions with, I've been blessed actually to not have any interactions with this person, is Destiny. What would you say about this figure? I mean, I don't understand why he's so popular, other than that he talks really fast and kind of pushes, I guess, degenerate ideas. But what have you noticed from your debates with this guy?
Well, Destiny was there first. He started at Justin TV before it became Twitch. Because he was one of the first doing what he was doing, he was able to accumulate a large audience. If Destiny came around today, I'm not even sure he would dispute that. But if he came about today and moved into this, kind of ethosphere, he would be probably a low-level streamer. So, but if you're there first, as you know, generally speaking, you're able to kind of consolidate an audience, and he was there first. Now, as to his continued rise in popularity, he's dealing with all sorts of legal troubles at the moment. He's dealing with all sorts of different things, but he is an A-tier debater. Or S-tier debater, if you want to say it that way, on the left side. And the reason is he's really good at memorization of talking points, and he's really good at regurgitation of them in a very quick way. However, when he goes up against people who are more in the logician form, he begins to fall flat. He avoids debates with those people generally like the plague, and he'll do this through the proposition itself by saying, look, I'm not going to agree to a proposition which can be falsified through logic. So what these people like to do is they like to argue only within the paradigm of regurgitation of talking point. My paradigm right, your paradigm left, my talking point, your talking point, my talking point, your talking point. The second that's rejected, the second you're like, these talking points are nebulous and stupid and have no logical sense to them at all, these people fall apart. Destiny's no exception to that.
Yeah, when I look on YouTube and I look up, for example, the biggest views that you've gotten, a lot of these relate to your interchanges with Tim Pool on Timcast and the debates that you've had there. What is your sense of those interactions, and what do you make of is the libertarian ethos kind of fading because they don't seem to really have a whole lot backing them up? I'm not saying that Dave Smith doesn't have good arguments when it comes to foreign policy or good critiques, but what do you think about this sort of libertarian ethos that has dominated alt media for so long, kind of beginning to have some cracks in the armor?
Great question. So I consider, I always give this analogy. Let's pretend that there's a sword of power, right? And the sword of power is embedded.
Hold that thought, because we do have a break. We'll come right back and we'll get to Andrew Wilson on the Alex Jones Show. I'm Jay Dyer, Jay's Analysis. Welcome back to the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show. I'm your guest host, Jay Dyer of Jay's Analysis. I want to remind you that if you'd like to watch some of my content, I'll be debating people from Twitter later today. Head on over to my YouTube channel, Jay Dyer. Follow me there. Follow me on X as well as following Andrew over on The Crucible on YouTube, The Extravaganza on Rumble. And you can find Andrew and The Crucible on Twitter or X as well. We're talking about this beginning of the end, I would say, of the normie libertarian sphere of the alternative media. People are beginning to look for more than just my rights, my freedom, my whatever I want to do. They want authenticity. They want to be grounded in something historical. Andrew, are you beginning to see the weakening and the questioning of the libertarian ethos out there in the zeitgeist?
Yeah. So I have an analogy for this. I say, look, there's a sword of power. Let's assume the libertarian and the Christian, they're arguing over who should be able to wield it. The libertarian says, in my paradigm, you're going to be allowed to be Christians. And the Christian says, in my paradigm, you're going to be allowed to be a libertarian. And by the time they're done arguing, the liberal has already taken the sword of power, cut them both down, seized complete control. And that's exactly what they did. The thing that's interesting here is that libertarian philosophy and progressive philosophy, both of them bank on a truism of the world that Christians have forgotten. We've had it beaten out of us. Politics is about power, and that's what it's about. And if Christians are not in power, then they're going to be ruled by people who are in power who aren't Christians. And that's that. Now, you've made a good point of pointing this out many times. So have I. Guys, even on the Catholic side, like Nick Fuentes, he's pointed this out many times. If we're not in charge, somebody else is in charge of us. And let's not pretend that libertarians aren't trying to be in charge. At the whole time, they're leading the charge, saying nobody should be in charge except us. Progressives are saying the same thing, but Christians have been so beaten down, we have forgotten that we need to be in authority in order for us to push our messaging out there and in order for us to have a just society to begin with, instead of letting other people rule over us. And by the way, the point of my debates, all of them, is to point out that secularists have there's no more reason for them to be in power than Christians. They have no greater justification than a Christian. Even if everything Christians believe is completely false, the secularist still has no more justification to be in power than us.
I think you're in a unique position, maybe beyond anyone else out there, because, and this might sound a little weird, but you've done so many debates that are hugely popular on the Whatever podcast with Brian over there, and you've debated endless feminists. What have you noticed that are really telling patterns, again, because you've had this unique experience that probably no one else has of debating more feminists than probably anybody else out there? What have you noticed? What's the pattern that's really crucial, or patterns that we need to understand?
Their worldview is based on a complete ahistoric understanding of the oppressor-oppressed view of the world. It's a Marxist view of the world, which is designed through a specific lens, and that lens is oppressor-oppressed. Because of this, everything that they believe is not historical at all. They only look at things through a paradigm of who's been oppressing who. And so for them, men have been the oppressors of women instead of the defenders of them. That there's never been a unison between the two sexes, only an oppression from one sex to the other that women had to fight their way out of with, I guess, annoying language, right? Because they certainly didn't use physical force. When in fact, the truth is that great rights were granted to women by men because we do live and we need each other, right? We need each other in these kind of great ways, and this is biblically grounded. But this idea, this kind of ahistoric idea that men have been traditionally the oppressors of women instead of the people who have fought all the wars, who have created all the infrastructure, who have done all these things, which have even allowed women to have the kind of nicest, most comfortable lives that they've ever had in the existence of all of humanity. And how are men treated for that? They're vilified. They're vilified across the board as though we're nothing more than these sort of, consumable wallets and cannon fodder. And this is what feminism has led women to. The idea that men are nothing more than just another Gucci purse. For it to be, that's last year's type of man. We'll get rid of him, just like last year's type of Gucci purse. Now we need to get a new one. And society has become completely sick at its core because of this. The intersexual dynamics. This is, by the way, Jay, the most Gen Z is the most sexually confused, most sexually, degenerate, and the confusion, the sexual confusion for intersexual dynamics is like nothing I've ever seen. They can't even agree on bizarre things like consent. They can't even agree on that. They don't understand interpersonal relationships at all. And it's kind of through these cracks that you see the intersexual dynamics beginning to break down. But feminism has been at the forefront of doing that, of muddying the waters, where everything becomes sexual harassment, even though it isn't. Everything becomes sexual assault, even when it isn't. You know what I mean? And it's through this muddying of the waters that you see the intersexual dynamics begin to really break down.
How do you think the system has become so successful at beating down men and brainwashing so many young women, especially Gen Z? What were the main techniques that you think that they were so successful at to achieve this dominance that they have?
The way they achieve everything, propaganda, baby. Propaganda is king, which is why we need Christians at the top producing our own propaganda. But let me give you an example of very successful propaganda. How about this for an idea? When you talk about the staggering rate differentials between sexual assault between men and women, until you look into it and you realize it's all lies. It's all lies. When you categorize, for instance, sexual assault as only being penetrative, well, women can't penetrate men, right? So anytime there's a sexual assault by them, it's not even categorized as being sexual assault. They'll add things that are bizarre, like catcalling, as a form of sexual assault. It stacks the rate sky high. But because of this, you can imagine when these people rattle off these stats, right? They'll rattle off these stats on every major news network which has ever existed. You know, men are hundreds of times more likely to essay a woman. Women can't feel safe anywhere. Men are these monsters. And it's just not true. Like, none of it's true. Very benign things, which are interpersonal between men and women, which happen in commonplace, can now be categorized as sexual assault, and men can be villainized and made out to be monsters. And it's through forms of propaganda like that you've now that led to what? Me Too. Me Too leads to like CEOs going, no, I'm just not even going to have any women left in the office. It's too dangerous to even have women around because they can levy these false accusations and we could be put in prison for life. And it's like, or have our reputation completely destroyed, or have all of our finances completely
believe all women,
crippled.
right? Believe all women.
Believe all women. So all of that, but all of that was just propaganda. But it was all backed by phony stats, phony statistics. It was all backed by, just nothing but phony nonsense. And the more you look into it, the more you realize almost everything which is stated about the intersexual predatory nature of men is wildly overstated. And in fact, men do the opposite. They have always traditionally protected women. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. And it's too bad because this intersexual dynamic has led to a massive birth rate crisis, the likes of which we've never seen, that we're not going to easily recover from. And maybe not recover from it at all. Japan's basically history. South Korea, basically history. Those are what we're going to consider in 100 years failed civilizations. And, the recovery from this, until some of that propaganda starts to change and it starts moving into, no, trust men. Men aren't there to be predators. Men aren't there to, essay you and do horrible things to you. And it's through a Christian lens that we can find a lot of these truths, which can then lead you towards looking at these stats yourselves and feminism itself. And also buying my wife's book called Feminism, which is a fantastic shilling on my behalf right now. Buy it right now. I need to go buy a new gun, and I take all of her gun money because I am a patriarchist. So
yeah, that's what we need is legitimate, authentic, patriarchal restoration, I guess we could say, in society. But I think when they captured the academic world and when they captured the corporate world, that made it really difficult to maintain masculine control and power, because now in a corporate setting, you have the same situation, like you said, where the HR department is run by a woman, and HR can decide, you're sexually harassing somebody with this email. It had an innuendo, and it may just be completely innocuous. But women have figured out, much like socialists and Marxists and others on the left, they figured out that a lot of these techniques and tactics are actually ways to gain power in society.
Yes.
In other words, the currency of oppression can become a tool, not just to cancel people, but to get your own social value and power exalted. Have you noticed that with a lot of these supposed leftists, they actually seem to be fairly psychotic, especially the ones that you've debated, this Naima girl and people like that.
They're totally power hungry from the bottom up, right? And they want to be in charge, and that's that. And they want Christians to see that within their worldview, they're not allowed to be. And the ones who don't are labeled Christian nationalists and Nazis and everything else, and are run completely out of town because they dared say, no, Christians can also be in charge. So yes, they are extremely power hungry. A good example of showing like how some of this can work in real time. I was watching on a news broadcast the other day. They were talking about how women are just killing it because they own more homes than men, right? They're just killing it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I looked into it. Well, it turns out it was like 30% of the homes they got in divorces. Does that sound like they're killing it? Right? No, it doesn't sound like they're killing it at all. It sounds like a bunch of propaganda, which is being reframed to make it appear as though women are being far more successful in the workplace than men are because of home ownership, when nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the idea is that these families are being broken up, and just because you get a house through a divorce settlement doesn't mean that you're killing it in the workplace, right? But this is the type of propaganda which leads to girl boss, girl power, things like this. Democrats love that. They eat it up. They want that female vote in the worst way because, again, it's about power.
Yeah, and of course we see that the tendency amongst women voters is almost, landslide towards Obama,
Democrats,
towards Biden, towards these just horrible policies. Maybe shifting a little bit into the political realm, because you do engage in debates about politics. I see you at night kind of going on and doing these late night TikTok debates on politics, MAGA. I've seen you do some MAGA debates. What do you think about where Trump's at? Is it time to depart from Trump, given what Candace was talking about earlier today with Epstein? Should we still support Trump? What's your take on all that?
You should be very cautious about pulling support for Donald Trump, and let me explain exactly why. This happens every single year that Trump was in office. There was some made up scandal with a bunch of Republicans or right wingers running to the forefront saying, now's the time. We've got to ditch Trump. This is an insurmountable scandal that we can never move past, right? And every single time they were wrong, every single time. And they would show, by the way, same playbook. Oh, he's slipping in the polls. America's turning against him. Everybody hates this guy now. And he was reelected, won the popular vote, won the Electoral College, right? Reelected after they painted him as an insurrectionist. There was no way for him to possibly live down being an insurrectionist. We have no proof at all that he was in the Epstein files. None. There's no evidence showing that. There was a massive blunder I think his administration made. You alluded to it earlier when they were trying to go for complete transparency. They moved in Dan Bongino, and then they have Patel. And these guys promised that they were going to release this stuff. They didn't. Do I think America deserves answers? Absolutely. But here's the thing, right? You as the first mate, you as the crew member, if the captain, the whole thing is, if the ship's going down, you're not supposed to bail on the ship. You know what I mean? You get through it. And right now, we don't know what all ends are going to be. We don't know what's going to happen with these releases. I'm not willing to turn on Trump just yet. I'm sorry, but that's not the case. I remember they were saying on the Israeli thing, that was it. That's the end of Trump. The fact that he went Israel first, and that was a blip. It was a blip. It lasted for a couple of days. It was over. You know what I mean? And it didn't really hurt him politically, ultimately at all. It was not a good time to move away from Trump. So any of the right wingers moving forward saying we have to bail on Trump, not there yet. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we need more.
And who are you going to bail on him for anyway? I hear these people are like, we will go for Kamala. Are you serious? Kamala Harris or a Democrat? You think who are you going to replace this guy with anyway? He's what we got, and that's that.
Yeah. Do you think that the left and the Democrats, are they dying? Is this party dying? Are we going to see new
Both parties are
forms
dying.
and
Both parties are dying. Yeah, neither party will survive populism. And we know that because of Trump's reelection. Populism, obviously, is very popular, right? For a reason. It's entailed in what it is. It's appealing to the most amount of people so all the left can offer you is more of the same. The left can offer you more degeneracy, more degeneracy, more degeneracy. That's all that they ever offer. They never offer anything else, right? What are they always running on? More gay rights, right? More lesbians, more transgender people. They're always running on, more marginalized group, more immigrants. It's
More
always more,
Islamic
more.
importation into the
Yeah,
West.
it's always the give us more of the same shit everybody hates, right? So people have already started to move away from that, especially Gen Z, who are now moving towards being perhaps the most conservative generation which has ever lived. Doesn't surprise me any, or at least has lived in maybe since World War II. What's really interesting here is the thing to point out is like the GOP is doing the same thing though. They're offering only more of the same of what Democrats were offering 10 years ago, and it's basically
Right.
the same thing. More degeneracy, more gays, more trans, more this, more that. The populist position, Trump coming out and saying English is going to be the language of America via executive order. That was a winner. We're going to deport immigrants, legal immigrants. That was a winner. We're going to end birthright citizenship. That was a winner. All of these various policies that he had, saying there's only two genders, massive winner. One over guys like Pierce Morgan, one over many of the middle of the road kind of progressives, right? They really like it. It appeals to far more people than just let's sprinkle some degeneracy on it. It's like every time there's a wound, both parties now just go, just sprinkle some degeneracy on it, right? And that'll cure the wound. Well, I think populism has killed both parties. The political landscape is going to be radically different. You'll probably see more guys like Fuentes moving into office than you will see guys like J.D. Vance in the next 30 years. Or you'll see guys, on the opposite side, the leftist side, way more socialist, maybe like Haas, for instance, guys like that who will be running rather than what you have seen with the normal uniparty.
Yeah, I think we're going to definitely see radicalization, and I don't mean that in the sort of terrorist Homeland Security speak. I just mean in the sense of people being more polarized into definitive positions, moving away from party politics and into right versus wrong versus right versus left, actual issues, standing on an actual platform rather than caving to whatever the talking points of the party are. What do you think about
which are released to the press in the morning, right? They're just released to them, to the White House press corps. Here's the talking points of the days, guy. Okay, President Trump decided today to, and they're literally reading a script. And that's not even, hidden information anymore. They just hand them a press release, and the media reports on it as though it's news.
Exactly.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Another element here that we might be wanting to pay attention to is the possibility of the radicalization in a real sense via cults, via weird religious movements. And you have done quite a few debates with some of these kind of fringe ideas, Black Hebrew Israelites, or you've done some debates with some Mormons over the years. What do you see with this, with this realm of the fringe and cults? Are cults going to make become a growing threat, we might say, in the country? Because when we get these periods of destabilization or national insecurity, people start to turn to odd things or to exactly. So, are cults now a threat?
Yes, but here's the truth, and you know this from all of the study that you've done. They always have been, and many of these political arms are actually cults, long-standing cults and entrenched cult traditions, going from Freemasons all the way over to Shriners and various things like this, which are and have their roots in occultism. Feminism has its roots in occultism, as you can read Occult Feminism, find that out yourself. So you know that the enemy, the great enemy, Satan, operates this way. What he does is he uses mostly truth, and then that's what pushes the lie. That's what makes the lie so deceptive, is it's masked in truth. Why do you think so many cults run with Jesus Christ is the truth? Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. That's what they'll always say, because that is the truth, right? But that's how you can also make things very perverse if you add enough truth to it when you sprinkle the lies in. So do I think occultism is going to be on the rise in one of the most spiritually bankrupt times in all of human history? Yeah, I think so. I think you're going to see people, and they're already doing it. They're running towards traditional churches as fast as they can. Orthodoxy is finally getting a foothold in the United States, but Catholicism, right? Roman Catholicism is also exploding. Any place where people can find any sort of traditional spiritual guidance, they're going to run towards. And if you think that cults aren't going to capitalize on that and aren't already, then you are completely mistaken, because they are, and you will see massive increases in that, witchcraft, everything else, and you already are.
Yeah, and I think the dangerous thing with like these Black Hebrew Israelites, as I see them growing quite a bit as well, is that they're really appealing to Black people and sort of giving them an alternative narrative. And I think those are ripe to be kind of turned into violent things via feds and via just innate sort of demonic ideology. So I think we have to be leery of these fringe, malleable religious movements that can be utilized by the establishment or by
The
bad
reason
actors.
this is occurring, by the way, Jay, is because of the idea of masculinity. The churches have become completely feminized.
Yes.
The Protestant church,
Absolutely.
especially, totally feminized. And so guys
Right.
like Black Hebrew Israelites will come in to Black communities who have had fathers completely ripped out of the home. It's one of the number one reasons the crime rates and everything else are so high. Completely fatherless. I mean, it's overwhelming. The abortions are out of control, this type of thing. What's so interesting here, though, is that these guys bring in a message of masculinity, right? And they can do things which will tailor to already existing paradigms in those communities. So promiscuity runs rampant in the Black community. Let's add polygyny, right? We'll add Christ with a little bit of polygyny thrown in there, right? That's pretty masculine. You could go knock up 50 chicks and God says it's okay, guys, right?
Right.
That's a pretty good package, isn't it? That's a pretty good little birthday present to get thrown in your lap.
Islam too.
God wills it.
Islam is also sort of marketed and packaged at times, especially for Black guys in prison. They'll try to convert them, get them into Islam.
Yeah, you can have multiple wives, this and that. But the idea here is masculinity, right? We know how to control our women, right? The thing is, though, is that you can have mechanisms for control socially of men and women through ecclesiastical authority. And we always did, and it worked well. We just moved away from ecclesiastical authority. Once that's reintroduced, the idea of losing community for women becomes terrifying, and they don't want to mess it up any more than men do. Those are the mechanisms and means of social control for men and women that are generally good for men and women. What these guys want to do is go in and be like, to the cage with you, and it's totally unnecessary. But any form of masculinity in a spiritually bankrupt place, because masculinity is the thing that needs to be assaulted, attacked first by the enemy, broken down by the enemy, and femininity ushered in. Anytime you see people who portray masculinity, you're going to see them have a huge following and a lot of people gravitating towards that, even if the ideas are actually poisonous. And I almost can't really blame society for doing that or young men for doing that. They're just like, well, look, I'm not going to be punished because I want to punch Nick in the face, right? Or I want to punch, Jack in the mouth. I'm not going to be punished for that, right? Great. I like that. That's way better than whatever this stuff is, right? So I think ultimately this is a big problem that you're seeing, and it's as masculinity rises back up, you're going to see occultism go in sync with that very same message. It's a winner.
Right. Lastly, as we close it out here in the last minute of the show, tell us about this the extravaganza that you got with Jake Rattlesnake over on Rumble. Tell us about this, and what are you guys covering over there?
Well, Rumble and Kick, it's a dopamine show. It's designed to just shoot your brain full of dopamine while you're at work, right? Most of our audience are between the ages of about 26 and 55. So I assume most of them are at work. We try to put on a really fun show, right? We cover daily cringe events, and then we get to the news of the day. It's about an hour and a half. But it's just all dopamine shots right to your brain. It's a flying circus designed specifically to part you and your money from you to me through great entertainment. That's what the show is, and I would be happy to see all of you over there. Look, I may be trying to part your money from your wallet, but I'm at least going to honestly give you something in exchange for it, which is fantastic entertainment, great analysis, right, and some of the better political takes of the day.
All right, thank you so much, Andrew Wilson of The Crucible and The Extravaganza, and Andrew Wilson on X. This is the Alex Jones Show. I want to remind you guys to head on over to my website, jaysanalysis.com, get the books in the shop, head on over to the Alex Jones store and get those excellent products as well.